Hello, my name is Holly Katz, and I play the violin in the National Symphony Orchestra of the Federal University of Fluminense in Niterói, Rio de Janeiro. This project, Violinistic Challenges in the Bachianas Brasileiras, originated from my experience as a concertmaster as well as a section player, where I observed difficulties in the preparation and performances of these wonderful compositions. The violinistic challenges or difficulties that hinder a Bachianas Brasileiras performance were separated into three categories: errors and lack of important musical notation in the scores, stylistic approach, as well as demanding technical passages. Villa-Lobos is known for his troublesome technical passages for the violins. This semester, researching many errors and lack of notation in the violin parts consumed the time allotted by the timetable of execution. If the time depleted to understand some errors took a semester, imagine what these uncertainties do to precious rehearsal time, as most of it has to be spent on the correction of errors and ambiguities and can diminish the performance. All the while, this could be easily remedied with the clarification of a written document. The research was divided into 4 different categories: errors, in addition to the lack of notation relating to the score and violin parts, conflicting instrumental indications, dynamics and articulation differences in the score parts and the Villa-Lobos recording, as well as personal proposals for solutions. The material examined was the orchestral score published by Ricordi, piano and orchestral manuscripts from the Villa-Lobos Museum, violin parts, plus the Villa-Lobos recording with the French Radio National Orchestra. Out of the 6 Bachianas written for orchestra, numbers 2, 3, and 4 were analyzed this semester. The process initiated with the second Bachianas and a Ricordi score, together with the violin parts copied digitally by Diogo Pereira for the Orchestra Sinfônica Brasileira, were used. Although the score is available for purchase, the original orchestral parts can only be rented through Bussi and Hawks and are costly. From the information gathered, the original manuscript is in their possession as well. When taking a look at the different categories aforementioned, the initial one, errors relating to the score and the violin parts, didn't contain numerous inaccuracies within the first movement, and being that it is not the original Bussi and Hawks edition, any inconsistencies found in the OSB parts might be different than those of the Bussi-Hawks edition and will be revisited in the future. It was noted that countless dynamics and articulations, slurs, and phrase markings in the violin parts and moreover in the violin lines of the score were missing. However, there were other instruments where these indications were specified. The following example will exemplify these observations. In this slide, it can be noticed that the violins play the melody coupled with the saxophone, and the latter's part has a crescendo, sforzando, and diminuendo that is emitted in the violin line. In the Villa-Lobos recording, the violins play in the same manner as the saxophone. Here, conflicting indications in the melodic line can be observed. It is played by the first violins and saxophone that began in the previous slide. Insufficient dynamic markings, as well as varying and even conflicting phrase notations, lead to an uncertainty of how to interpret this passage. Generally, this is resolved by the saxophone dominating the melody while the violins quietly follow. Traditionally, the violins play 1 bow per beat in this passage. A viable different approach to the phrasing comes from the Villa-Lobos recording. A series of light accents on the separated triplet notes that in turn contrast with the 2/8 note slurs, resulting in a strong, passionate melody where the violins overshadow the saxophone. Bachianas 3 was analyzed using the Ricordi score, the orchestral manuscript score, as well as the 2-piano manuscript that was graciously supplied by the Villa-Lobos Museum. As for the violin parts studied, they were from a handwritten copy signed by the copyist Frau Azevedo. This example is the first of three undetermined wrong notes. The F natural in this passage shown on the left side is from a violin tutti section in the first movement. It was originally printed as an F natural in the manuscript scores and violin part. However, throughout the years, for an unknown reason, it was changed with an ink pen in the violin part to an F sharp. Possibly, it is a known correction as other orchestras also play F sharp, but there has not been a written source to verify this change. The original F natural is played in the Villa-Lobos recording. Taken from the two-piano version at the end of the first movement, here is the next example of unclear notes. Shown on the left of the slide is a tutti passage deriving from the second piano line. The arrows highlight the two E flats played by the right hand, and a flat symbol is even placed in the higher octave to reiterate the importance. However, the first violin part, orchestral manuscript, and recording score have the E flat from the higher octave as absent, although it is clearly heard and present in the Villa-Lobos recording. The last example of imprecise notes takes place at the end of the second movement, where the violins play a passage representational of the Bach Brandenburg No. 3 opening, all in unison with the solo piano. The unison, however, is muddled by wrong notes that the copyist in the original manuscript mistakenly wrote, and therefore was not printed correctly in neither the score or parts. The correct notes are played in the Villa-Lobos recording as in other recordings consulted, such as Nelson Frey, Isaac Kerubchevsky, and the OSB, and Jose Fagali, Kenneth Schimmerhorn, and the Nashville Symphony. This is a correction that has been accepted. This correction, however, was not implemented into the violin part that has been used in performances at the OSN, where there is no knowledge of the change. As for the Bachianas 4, the recording score and the piano solo manuscript were kindly given by the Villa-Lobos Museum. The violin parts are published by the Academia Brasileira de Música. Anyone that has done violin orchestra auditions in Brazil will recognize these two measures from the difficult 16th note passage work of the last movement. Within this brisk section, there are 4 separate incidences of wrong notes, 2 that are present in the exposition and 2 in the recapitulation. As there is no official consent on what is wanted, more often than not, it is determined during rehearsals and varies with each performance. The first example is in this slide. The orchestral score on the left of the screen, which includes the first violin part, both have a B natural in the parts, indicated by the red arrow. Opposite, the example shows the solo piano version, where the B flat is highlighted by the yellow arrow, each conflicting with one another. Seen here, 3 bars later from the previous slide, the orchestral score has a G written, whereas in the piano score and violin part, an F is present. Often at rehearsals, the F note is changed to a G. In the reprise at the end of the Bachianas 4, in the orchestral score, the first violins have an E, while below, the second violins have a D written, the yellow arrow indicating this. It appears that this inconsistency comes from the second violins, as the piano score has an E as well. The E seems to make the most sense, as in this passage, the note G is always preceded by a E. Now, contradictory to the previous slide, where the note E seemed to be the better solution, we see the violin parts, first and seconds, have the note D. Another example of uncertain notes in the violins can be seen here. A 3-group sequence of 16th notes in the violin line is played twice. Once repeated, there is a change in the part that has the F, shown with the blue rectangle, turned into a G, circled in red with an arrow pointing to it. Although the part is correct, it is almost always played incorrectly by repeating the first cycle again, maintaining the F note. The reasoning behind the G is due to the eventual modulation into the key of C. All these changes and uncertainties leave an impression of doubt when performing and are taking an audition, when at these moments confidence and certitude should be at its highest level. One of the most surprising research discoveries this semester was the Errata Sheet. Originating as a tool to communicate content revisions by book publishers, Errata Sheets are now also used by librarians in all of the major professional orchestras in the United States in order to collect and store data of errors in orchestral parts and scores. These sheets are shared within the major professional orchestral networks such as Philadelphia, Boston, and Symphony Orchestras. A credible internet site created by the former librarian of the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra, Clinton F. Newig, disclosed that there were Errata Sheets for all the Bachianas Brasileiras. The author of these Bachianas sheets, D. Wilson Ochoa, presently head librarian of the Boston Symphony, was formerly the librarian of the Nashville Symphony and a co-producer of the Bachianas Brasileiras recordings with Kenneth Schimmerhorn. For those recordings, Ochoa did all the corrections for each orchestral score and instrumental part and compiled the information onto Errata Sheets. The most astonishing fact found was that there were 460 different Errata entries through a span of 24 pages for just the Bachianas 2, while the Bachianas 3 beat it with 94 pages and 1,860 entries, and finally the Bachianas 4 with 32 pages and 640 Errata entries. As understood from the numbers, it is impossible to correct everything during rehearsal. An initiative was taken to reach Mr. Ochoa through an email that explained this project and additionally requested any information he could kindly share. Inspired by this fact, an idea was sparked. Why not start an Errata Sheet project with the OSN and eventually expand it to other orchestras throughout Brazil? Over 60% of the OSN's performances are of Brazilian music, much of which are needing to be set side by side with the score and manuscript and revised. Further performances can only benefit from records or sources kept by different orchestras and researchers. Creating this network of information and sharing, it will continue a tradition. Many errors and discrepancies in the scores and the violin parts of the Bachianas Brasileiras have been uncovered throughout these last 3 months of research. Some of these stem from the disparity between the orchestral scores, manuscripts, and piano scores, and other corrections from an interpretive viewpoint. The problem with these uncertainties is that there is no clarification in a written manner. Valuable rehearsal time is spent on the correction of these precedent imprecisions, which could be efficiently be corrected by a way of a written document that clarifies these areas. What is more, at auditions and performances, when the level of confidence and certitude should be impervious, a feeling of doubt can stifle the belief in one's perception of readiness, which can lead to a lesser performance. Originally, the research of corrections in the violin parts was to be included in the final product, but as there are so many uncertainties, a reevaluation will have to occur when the proposal or anti-project is to be resubmitted. Thank you.